World War II turned the skies of Europe into a brutal battleground. And in that fight, one American machine was laughed at from the start. A monster in the air. Too heavy, too bulky, too slow to survive against Germany's nimble fighters. They called it a flying barn door. But the joke didn't last long, because this so-called barn door proved something the Luftwaffe never expected. It could dive faster, hit harder, take punishment, and keep flying when other planes fell from the sky. This was the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, the Jug. Not pretty, not graceful, but devastatingly effective. And here's the shocking truth of what Germany really thought about it. When the P-47 Thunderbolt first appeared over Europe in 1943, German pilots didn't know whether to laugh or to pity the Americans who built it. Against the lean lines of the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and the Focke-Wulf 190, the Jug looked absurd. Its fuselage was wide, its wings thick, and it weighed almost twice as much as the fighters it was supposed to face. To the Luftwaffe, it seemed less like a Predator and more like a flying barn door lumbering through the sky. The ridicule came quickly. Reports from German intelligence dismissed the Thunderbolt outright. Too heavy, too fuel-hungry, too slow to survive a real fight. On paper, it looked like another American mistake. Just one more overweight design destined to be chewed up by experienced German interceptors. But paper can lie, because when the Thunderbolt finally joined bomber escort missions, the truth started to break through the mockery. German fighters diving on B-17s soon found the Jug diving faster. Its speed in a plunge was unmatched, and any pilot reckless enough to follow risked tearing his aircraft apart. And when the Jug opened fire, the wall of .50 caliber slugs ripped through even the toughest airframes. Suddenly, this barn door wasn't funny anymore. It was dangerous. What stunned the Germans most was what lay hidden beneath that bulky frame. At the heart of the Thunderbolt roared the Pratt and Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, an 18-cylinder radial engine that churned out more than 2,000 horsepower. Coupled with a cutting-edge turbo supercharger, the Jug could climb to altitudes above 30,000 feet and still fight with full strength. By comparison, the Luftwaffe's trusted Bf 109s and FW-190S began gasping for air at those heights. In level flight, the P-47 could reach speeds over 430 miles per hour. Astonishing for an aircraft many had mocked as a steel brick. But its real advantage came in the dive. When the Jug pointed its nose down, it could surpass 500 miles per hour without losing control. German pilots quickly learned that chasing it downhill was suicide. Their own fighters risked tearing apart in the slipstream while the Thunderbolt roared away untouched. And then there was its firepower. With 8 wing-mounted Browning .50 caliber machine guns, the Jug unleashed a storm of lead that could shred even the toughest airframes. German crews described short bursts that ripped through Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs as if they were made of paper. Durability sealed its reputation. Pilots riddled Thunderbolts with cannon shells, only to watch in disbelief as the battered Jug limped home trailing smoke, refusing to fall. The Luftwaffe had mocked a barn door. What they faced instead was a fortress with wings. What the Germans never saw was just how unlikely the Thunderbolt's success really was. Back in 1940, when Republic Aviation first unveiled the design, even the U.S. Army Air Forces had doubts. At more than 10 tons fully loaded, the P-47 was almost twice the weight of most fighters of its day. To many, it looked like a losing proposition in a world where dogfights were still defined by speed and agility. Some officers argued to abandon the project altogether, favoring the smaller, more proven P-40 instead. And the early test flights seemed to prove them right. The first prototypes overheated constantly. They struggled to climb. At high altitudes, they were unstable. The massive turbo supercharger system demanded miles of ductwork that only added more weight. On the ground and in the air, the Jug looked like a failure in the making, but Republic refused to quit. Engineers reworked the cooling system. They refined the turbo intakes. They strengthened the airframe again and again. Piece by piece, the ungainly prototype evolved into something altogether different. By 1942, the Thunderbolt had matured into a high-altitude predator. It still wasn't nimble, but it didn't need to be. It could dive faster, hit harder, and endure more punishment than anything else the Americans had. The Jug's long, difficult birth had forged a beast, and soon Germany would meet it face to face. When the Jug finally entered combat over Europe, the Luftwaffe met it with the same old confidence. German aces believed their Bf-109s and Fw-190s could cut it down easily, just as they had with other American fighters before. But the Thunderbolt refused to play their game. Instead of turning duels, P-47 pilots used brutal simplicity. From high above, they would dive like hawks, unleash a storm of .50 caliber fire, then climb back into the clouds before the enemy could react. This boom and zoom tactic turned the Jug into a predator that struck on its own terms and vanished just as quickly. Chasing it downhill was suicide. German fighters often shattered when pushed to those speeds. Climbing after it was just as hopeless. For bomber crews, the Thunderbolt was a godsend. Before its arrival, daylight raids into Germany were massacres. B-17s and B-24s fell in flames to interceptors. But with Jugs screaming down from altitude, the balance shifted. Suddenly, bombers were making it home in greater numbers, and the Thunderbolt's fury didn't stop in the skies. Armed with 8 heavy machine guns, it tore across rail yards, convoys, and even tank columns. German troops learned to dread its broad silhouette overhead. They gave it a nickname, Jabbo, short for fighter bomber. What began as mockery was ending in fear. The Jug had arrived, and it was changing the war. At first, German intelligence reports brushed the Thunderbolt aside. They described it as clumsy, overweight, and slow to climb, hardly a match for the nimble interceptors of the Reich. To the analysts in Berlin, the Jug was nothing more than another bloated American experiment. But the battlefield told a different story. Luftwaffe pilots soon discovered the Jug's terrifying truth. Once it had the altitude advantage, escape was nearly impossible. Its dives were so fast, so controlled, that even the best German machines couldn't follow without risking destruction. Ace pilot Heinz Baer, one of Germany's most experienced fighters, admitted his frustration. He called the Thunderbolt fast in the dive and impossible to shake once committed. For a man who had outflown countless opponents, the Jug was a menace that refused to yield. Diaries from other pilots echoed the same disbelief. Time after time, they poured cannon shells into Thunderbolts, only to watch in amazement as the battered aircraft limped away, smoke trailing, but still refusing to fall. By mid-1943, German intelligence was forced to change its tune. The flying barn door was officially classified as a high-speed, highly durable escort fighter, one that demanded respect. And when Thunderbolts flew in disciplined groups, coordinating their boom and zoom strikes with ruthless efficiency, even seasoned aces had to think twice before attacking. The Jug was no longer a joke. It was a threat that every German pilot had to fear. By the summer of 1943, the Thunderbolt wasn't just another fighter in the skies. It was reshaping the way air combat was fought. The Luftwaffe's traditional tactics, built around tight-turning dogfights, were suddenly useless. The Jug refused to play that game. It fought from above, dictated the terms of every encounter, and vanished before the Germans could answer. Trying to chase it uphill was a fool's errand. The Thunderbolt climbed with raw power, leaving Bf-109s straining behind. Diving after it was even worse. German aircraft simply couldn't withstand the speeds that the Jug handled with ease. More than one pilot learned the hard way that following a Thunderbolt downhill could mean structural failure and death. Its range only deepened the problem. Escorting bombers deep into German territory, the P-47 could stay in the fight far longer than the short-legged interceptors of the Reich. The Luftwaffe was forced to scramble again and again, exhausting men and machines in battles they could no longer control. And the damage wasn't only tactical, it was psychological. Luftwaffe veterans who once entered combat brimming with confidence began to hesitate. Some even avoided contact, wary of being lured into a fight they couldn't win. On the ground, German soldiers learned to fear its roar. The deep thunder of that radial engine meant strafing runs, shattered convoys, and bombs raining down. Day after day, the Jug wore them down, not just with bullets and fire, but by breaking morale itself. By the war's end, the Thunderbolt had erased every doubt. What began as a punchline, a flying barn door too heavy for combat, had become one of the most feared fighters in Europe. In the skies, it shattered Luftwaffe tactics. On the ground, it ripped apart convoys, railroads, and supply lines, leaving German forces crippled. Its role as a bomber escort proved decisive. With Jugs overhead, American heavy bombers could finally strike deep into Germany and come back alive. Every raid the Thunderbolt protected bled the Luftwaffe further, draining pilots and machines until the once proud air arm could no longer keep pace. But the Jug's legacy reached beyond victory. It changed how America thought about air power. No longer would speed and agility alone define a fighter. The P-47 proved that durability, firepower, and sheer strength could be just as decisive, if not more so. That philosophy carried directly into the jet age, influencing aircraft like the F-86 Sabre that would dominate the skies in Korea. Even decades later, German veterans spoke of the Jug with a mixture of frustration and respect. To them, it was proof of America's industrial might and tactical innovation. Today, only a handful remain flying, yet the thunder of that big radial engine still echoes a truth the Luftwaffe learned the hard way. The Jug broke their back. The P-47 Thunderbolt was never the sleekest fighter, never the fastest, never the most graceful, but it didn't need to be. It proved that raw power, rugged durability, and overwhelming firepower could change the course of a war. What began as a machine of mockery became the Luftwaffe's nightmare, and today it still stands as a symbol of American strength and determination, a reminder that sometimes the heavyweight doesn't just survive, it dominates. What about you? What do you think of the Jug, the fighter that forced Germany to rethink the skies? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey, hit like to support the channel. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next story of the machines that made history.